The FNRad Snowboard podcast is sponsored by Wired Snowboards from Vancouver, BC. Wired joined a dozen or so other brands at the Boardroom's Future of Snowboarding event last weekend at Cypress Mountain. It was really fun. There were giveaways and demos and companies showing off next year's gear, and Wired did about 40 on-snow demos throughout the day. It was super cool to see that many snowboards up on Cypress. You can buy a Wired board at the Boardroom in Vancouver or their North Van location, or go to wiredsnowboards.com and design yourself a custom graphic board built from high-quality materials right here in Vancouver, BC. Also check out boardroomshop.com for all your snowboarding needs. Brian from Dakine hooked me up with 2 new pairs of Dakine gloves at that event. I was so super stoked. The Team Baron Gourmet and the Impreza Gourmet, both of which are super awesome. Thanks again, Dakine. Thanks again, Brian. Vans boots keep my feet warm and dry, and Intuition liners make the boots fit perfectly. I've been rocking Anon goggles this year and could not be more stoked that Burton Canada stepped up to support the show. Thanks to Steve and Jonathan from Burton Canada. Tribute Board Shop in Nelson, BC was the first sponsor to offer me some cash. Those guys are amazing. Please go to tributeboardshop.ca and check out the deals going on right now for the end of the season. Crow's Nest Barbershop is stepping up to contribute to the show and keep it free for all you amazing listeners out there. So get your haircut at one of their many locations. Check out crowsnestbarbershop.com to find the nearest location to you. And thanks as always to Grouse Mountain. Marcus and the park staff did a rebuild over the past week. If you live in Vancouver or are planning to visit, make sure you check out Grouse. I was up there a couple times this last week playing around in some secret stashes, and I had a really fun time. So go to grousemountain.com and plan your next visit.
It was a totally fun time, didn't get too gnarly.
I kind of look at the Mystery Air as an improved evolution of the Switchblade.
Snowboarding is ours.
And obviously I like working with Burton.
As an old school snowboarder, you get so used to being treated as a second-class citizen.
And I was like, how do you spell your last name? He said, K-E-L-L-Y. And I was like, oh, we should get married. And he's like, no, too symmetrical.
This week was a great week. I got some good snowboarding in, met some rad people. I really like that Standard Films put out a free link to their Best of TB movie on YouTube. You should go to their Instagram bio for their active link to that. Thanks, Standard. David Benedek was in some of the later TB movies. I mostly knew him from his robot food parts, and then I went back and watched Afterbang like yesterday afternoon, which is free on YouTube as well. They're so rad. I also heard David's Looking Sideways podcast episode and thought it was awesome, and I knew right away I wanted to have him on the show.
So I was born in 1980, and I have an older brother, so he turned me onto all that stuff fairly young. I mean, young for here because it was still somewhat fresh. Like, we were the first snowboarders on the hill kind of in the late 80s. But then skateboarding had a real big push here, and also skateboarding, BMX, the entire ET basically.
Yeah, I remember.
Right, that era. I think when I grew up, the American pop culture was the promised land. We grew up watching all the Powell skate videos and everything, and idolizing all these old school skaters and snowboarders and
they were new school at that time, right? Like the Bones Brigade. I remember Mike Vallely having that kind of edge that I was like, oh, this is cool. Like the Bones Brigade is cool. All these guys doing. I can remember that feeling when I learned how to skateboard down a sidewalk and you could kind of go around people in the sidewalk, and it felt really cool just to be able to be that kid. You know what I mean? I could see myself from somebody else's perspective across the street.
Exactly.
And be like,
I mean, that's
yeah, I'm skateboarding. Yeah. I'm that guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that came from, Thrashin' was a big movie for us.
And also just like, like Michael J. Fox, like hooking onto that cab or whatever and like being pulled on a skateboard, like that to me is like that's who I wanted to be.
That was a big deal.
I think that was a big. So I think it's really funny because I'm always thinking like, we were kind of in the beginning of that, culture. And then I talked to people who were a little bit older, and to them, when I started, it was already totally blown out because it was in Back to the Future. It was in E.T. So I think if I pull back a little more, I think I'm like a typical, like consumer kid of the 80s that just gets turned on to those things.
Me too. Totally. I agree with you 100%. When I started doing the podcast, I thought if I go back to the beginning, that's a great place to start. So I was thinking, okay, well, the first pro rider that really stood out to me was Damian Sanders. And then as I looked into it, I'm like, well, there was a bunch of guys before him. That Tahoe crew, like Terry Kidwell, when I started, was kind of, he was somebody from an era before that to us, kind of.
Yeah, same for me.
I hate to say it, it didn't matter to the now. You know what I mean? Like it was like, we didn't go back to see what they were doing before because we were always looking to see what they were doing right now or what was going to be next year. Like we were always kind of looking at there was so many advances of things. And what I really, really loved about your interview on the Looking Sideways podcast was when you talked about those Burton two-tongues. I hadn't thought about them for so long, but that product was so what you wanted, like in such a real way. Like the people that had it, I really did envy. My buddy Phil had a pair of them. And I remember
the red ones too.
Yeah,
red or the green ones. There too.
They were
or like turquoise. There's turquoise and there's red. I think.
Yeah, they had red tongues. I think
those are the ones. Yeah. Oh my god!
And I remember looking at them when he took them off, and they're all wet at his house, like holding his boots and looking at them, and the way that they worked, and thinking, oh, if I had these, I think I would leave one side laced up, and I would only lace from the other side.
Yeah,
they were.
Yeah, that was. I think that was the whole idea to like, you're being able to like tuck me better or something. Yeah, like, I think that was the thought. Lace up only one side, and I don't know. It kind of makes sense. I don't know why aren't we all riding two-tongue boots? I don't know. I never rode a. Oh, maybe I did ride a pair afterwards.
Did you? Some point. Yeah, I never did.
Well, I started riding for Burton actually a year after I saw those.
Wow.
But I think then I only got like an old pair and only like for a year or so. I don't know. There's some vague memory that I had those, but
that's so rad. Yeah. What a fun time to be a snowboarder. So it sounds like you got that thing that a lot of guys got with the older brother, right? Because you're chasing an older brother, so you're very competitive with, especially with the things that you guys are both doing, and you want to show them like, hey, look, I can do this. And
absolutely.
How much older than you was he? Was he like 4 or 5 years?
He's 3 years older.
3 years, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's perfect. So the younger brother seems to be the more talented one usually. There are a few
or maybe just the one. Maybe just the more driven one because
more driven.
He is, he is someone to beat. The older one's just like, I don't care about my little
just
brother.
Cruising.
Yeah. So I, there's certainly something in that where it's trying to just trying to tag along. I think that's what if you see also like now with like, I don't have kids myself, but like almost all my friends do, and if you see the younger ones, how much earlier they're walking because they see the other kid walking, so they just they have an example to follow, and I think and then I guess whatever happens after that is maybe up to talent or drive or whatever or
right. I think it's the programming from when they're young, because Terrier has older brothers. He was chasing them around. Just so many people, dude. Like so many of the riders that got to a really high level were
Makes sense.
chasing brothers. Yeah. Or sisters. I'm sure there's some sisters that were ripping too.
Oh, totally.
So you got on Burton that early because those two-tongue boots were 91 or 92.
Yeah, they were. I can tell you exactly. It's really funny. I have an exact like time referenced memory only because of snowboards.
Right.
Like I know exactly that two-tongue boot came out in fall of 92.
Oh wow,
like
that's amazing.
That's the only reason why I know that was 92.
Yeah.
So I saw those in 91, and that and then the year after, this next season, we were at a contest, and we were just like Groms, and we weren't even very good. But I saw a guy on the side of the half pipe and wearing like all Burton clothes.
Nice.
And that was I'm probably the same for you guys. If you were either like a ridiculous poser,
yes,
or you worked for Burton. There's only those two choices. There's nothing in between, like there's really nothing in between. No one would have, like, at least I don't know where I'm from. There was no one. And then, so I just walked up to the guy and I asked him like, "Hey, you work for Burton?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, and I said something like along the lines of like, "Hey, so what's going on with promotion and stuff?" And he thought it was because I was like 12 years old or something, or 11.
Wow.
He thought it was hilarious, and then he gave me his business card.
Amazing.
And I don't even know. We sent him some like crappy photos or something, and he actually hooked me and my best buddy up, and we got a box. And like, I mean, that was, and this is only like 6 months after I saw those. I almost fainted at seeing those two-tongue boots.
Yeah.
So that was like, I mean, it was the most ridiculous. Like, it's still probably the highlight of my life so far is receiving that box, and even I don't even know if we were properly sponsored yet, but for us, we were on the Burton team.
That's like, incredible.
Yeah, like we actually went down to like the gas station or train station or something to get like one of the business cards printed from these like crappy machines that said like Burton team, and it said our two names, like me and my best buddies.
Oh my God.
we didn't really have an avenue for business cards. We just like thought like we're part of the Burton team now. Like that's it. We made it.
That's so dope.
Yeah, we were like completely fanatic.
Did that give you the drive to compete at a better level, do you think? Like, did you have like something to like, you had to prove to Burton that you're worth being on the team because you're already on the team?
Yeah, it's weird. Like I never felt like it wasn't like a pressure to think that I had to impress them.
Right.
It was more like it was just fuel. It was just stoke, I was like just that much more excited to ride, and I think, and then, then I think they just gave us basically. I think what happens is they just gave us a board and they saw what came of it, and then they realized a year later, hey, wow, we were kind of lucky. Those kids are actually okay. They're good.
Right.
And so I think, the year after they gave us the board, like both me and my buddy, we won some contests and stuff. And then I think they just kind of kept us along on flow for a little while. And, but yeah, I think we were just like, for us, like the deal was sealed. Like we were part of the team.
Yeah.
I think they had no idea that like we had basically like we felt like we had been signed on. We were on there.
You got business cards. So if ever anyone asks you, like, "Oh, hey, what are you doing here?" Well, we're here with the Burton team. Yeah. That's incredible. That's so fun. So what contest series are you doing? Are these local?
Yeah, kind of. It was actually pretty rad. When I grew up, it was a time when like obviously when the ISF was still around. Yeah. The ISF was never that big in the US, but basically there was really well-functioning system of like contests, and really down from like you could ride regional cups, which were basically like anyone could enter. It was like maybe even age bracket, below 16, above 16 or something. And then from then on you could ride like the national cups, which I think still everyone could enter. And then from there you could ride continental cups if you had if you're maybe top 10 or something in your country.
Sure.
And then from there you could move on to like World Cups. So there was like a really like a totally, you know, like a solid ladder. And it was really exciting because you always had that next step that you wanted, you know, like you rode regional cups, you rode German cups, you knew like, hey, it would be rad if we, you know, if we get like 6 good results, then maybe we could even like ride with like some of the, you know, Scandinavian guys in this one contest in so-and-so. And so, and obviously the best, I don't know if you were into the contest scene, but the one thing that was like right away on our bucket list was the Junior World Championships, and everyone from like, I met basically everyone I know today when they were like 15 at one of those contests.
That's so rad.
Like people like Ingemar Bachmann, like all those guys were there as like 17-year-olds.
Nice.
So like Johan Olofsson, like all those people. I mean, those were people that I wouldn't say like I know them, but it's not like, I mean, like it's not like they turned into like my best friends later on. But those are more the people we looked up to. But like also like Duffy, Cale Stevens, Trevor Andrew, everyone everyone went through those Junior World Championships pretty much.
That's amazing.
Jussi Oksanen, we all, like, before kind of like filming and everything, I already knew everyone from those contests. And so once a year, somewhere on the globe, they had Junior World Championships, and you knew like, dude, that's where we want to go, because I think there's usually a sponsor that paid for the flight, and it was, I mean, it was like unsupervised 14 to 18-year-olds who just like party their brains out, like to the point where it's like there were people with fire extinguishers in the hotel, just like it was completely out of hand. Yeah. And I think anyone who went there like had the best time. And so that was a real good, you know, motivation to like, you know, keep riding and keep riding contests.
Yeah, a couple of things there. The ISF as a governing body for snowboarding contests seem to do a really good job of making fun contests. And I'm not talking about the stuff that happened after. I mean, the actual contests had rider input into how they would be run. That's what it sounds like, one of the strong suits of that and what we lost when FIS came in and just destroyed the International Snowboard Federation. So there's that. Were the contests fun, or was it mostly just the stuff that was going on afterwards that you were going for?
No. The contests, I always enjoyed contests. I never really, because I have I'm competitive, but I can like let it go real easy too. Like, so for me, it was always a good deal. It was like, usually you ride a really good setup, especially back in the day when pipes weren't really available that much. So you go to a contest to even ride proper jump. Like, you didn't really have a proper jump. So you go to a contest, and you also to ride and see other riders. And so you go there and you usually ride a pretty good setup. And then if you do good, you know, it's great. You can celebrate. If you do bad, it's, who cares? You can celebrate and whatever. It's like, but I think it's a really good combination of like I think it was definitely like, we wanted to do good, but at the same time, if it didn't happen, it wasn't like a big deal. But that doesn't mean that we kind of gave it all. It's, So who was sending you to these contests? So who were your sponsors at that time? Well, still Burton, but I mean, they weren't really sending us. I think I think we got like, you know, one outfit or something a year, and maybe maybe the third year into it, they probably gave us like $100 a year for lift tickets or something. It was really awesome. Low key. Yeah. But for some reason, like the federations, as unorganized as they were, because when you mentioned that the ISF did a really good job at like making like snowboarders in charge, I think it was due to no one else being around. The only people who ran those contests were snowboarders who, to some extent had an interest in running these contests, but they were also in it for being in it, and so I think there's also like a glass ceiling that eventually the ISF hit and would have hit with or without FIS.
Right.
It was like, I mean, the guys supervising the trainers, basically the coach of the junior worlds team, he wasn't a coach, he was just there to party with us.
Right.
So it was like so I think, but for some reason they managed to get enough sponsors of the federation, I think because snowboarding was also a hot thing.
Yes.
I think they managed to get like sponsors to those events that would eventually pay for lodging or flights. Because I remember the craziest thing was the Junior World Championships in '96, I think, in Japan, were sponsored by KLM, the airline.
Wow.
And they flew everyone, all of the nations to Japan. And what they did was, I think in order to facilitate it, like probably least expensive for them, they flew all the nations to Amsterdam, of all places. And then from Amsterdam, on one single airplane to Japan. So at the gate in Amsterdam, there was like, I don't know, 250, like, probably half of them already wasted, like 16-year-olds, jumping on a plane. And that plane ride was like straight out of a movie. It was completely ridiculous. Like, I remember, I think it might have even been Nicholas Miller or someone. Like, I saw flight attendants like being hit in the face with like wet towels, and like it was so out of hand that like halfway through the flight, the entire main cabin was like stopped being served. Like it was so ridiculous. Like, oh man. And like going to Japan, like being 16, like people were just like so excited, and like it was the coolest. It was like ridiculous. Like,
so how many of these athletes have their parents with them? None?
No one. No, none. There's no parents at all. There's no parents. There's no parents. And you think, I mean, and who supervises these kids? Other snowboarders, right? Because like also in the US, I'm pretty sure I could see with, America being always a little more on the strict side of things, I could see them maybe having a little more of a professional back end and like actual coaches and stuff, because US ASA was always a little more organized than the rest. But
I don't know though. I went to Tim
maybe
Wendell's.
not.
Yeah, I went to Wendell's.
Yeah, maybe not.
91 as a 16-year-old. Is that what that would be? 91 or 92.
Yeah, so
and
maybe it's the same.
It was chaos. It was there. I remember getting there, and up until that point, I'd done summer camp, and summer camp in Canada is, a little bit of religion. You read from the Bible in the morning. Everybody swims together. There's like 2 counselors for every 6 kids, and they're worried about where you are. Like we didn't know where you guys were for like 3 minutes, and then you get to snowboard camp. And it was Chris Pappas picked us up in a van that had a mattress in the back. So there's just a mattress. All the snowboards go on the mattress.
Sounds about
and
right.
then we have to sit like our backs sideways to the wall for the drive from the Portland airport to the random spot that he had rented at that point. And it's just, like 6 or 8 campers in the back of a Chevy Astro van with no seats. I remember being like, this is like it was a free for all, but we were pretty good kids, you know what I mean? And we didn't have access to anything. There was like we couldn't get alcohol or anything. We're 16. It's the drinking age is 21. But we were watching the coaches were getting loose, right? Like the coaches are just getting wasted. It was crazy. I remember being like, this is not the same world that I was in last summer. It's a different world. That's
that
fun.
was kind of it's funny because back then, like, I'm thinking back, like, it does seem out of hand in the sense, like, especially like some, like, I think they never did the same mistake to put all kids in either one airplane or one hotel, because that one hotel in Poland the year before, I think it actually got trashed, like, really hardcore.
Right.
But for some reason, when I think back, I still think, like, there was, like, it was like a friendly chaos. It wasn't like it was to some extent still a responsible chaos. Maybe I'm just trying to make that up in retrospect, but I don't know. It felt like a good, a good looseness. It wasn't like, I mean, at least I didn't think it was scary. Maybe parents would have thought it was scary. But,
right. Now having kids that age, I trust my kids. I think that's the thing, is that I could see my kids being in that environment and handling themselves, But I definitely remember that feeling I didn't do much in competitive snowboarding at that age. But we would do road trips, we'd go on road trips, and I remember having to talk our way into getting a hotel room in some, like, seedy area in New Hampshire or something. And just like leaving my wallet with the people and saying, look, I don't have a credit card. I'm 16 years old. Like, and they're like, you can't rent a room until you're 21. And I'm like, but we need somewhere to sleep. We've got money.
Yeah.
I've got a car. You can have the keys to my car. We're not leaving. I think that's what I did. I gave them the keys to my car at 16 years old. And for the most part, we left a mess. We had ordered pizza or whatever and left a bit of a mess, but there just weren't any adults. That is really the thing, right? Like, it takes an adult to cause some real trouble. Like, some adult has to be there saying, hey, you know what? You guys are going to pay for that window or that lamp or whatever. Then it's trouble. Snowboarding had such a crazy, bad reputation, but, like, well earned. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's definitely an element of truth to the looseness of that beginning, to be honest, I think that's what I learned mostly at, like, looking at the generation after me, the young pros who were growing up in FIS and in coaching. They still turn into the Danny Davises of today.
Right.
Like, it's kind of like, I think snowboarding's still contagious enough of a culture that even if you try to kind of strap it down with these, more classic, regimented ways of dealing with, like a very, very, athlete driven, like classic athlete,
Yes. Like wide world of sports. I saw it with the U.S. Open. I'm trying to watch it, and I'm going, the color commentary is not that colorful. You know what I mean? It's snowboarding. Yeah. And then when Terry got in there in the room and was calling it like it was, people were like, "Ooh, Terry calling it like it is," And I'm like, it's really hard to see snowboarding really being pushed into that hole, but it doesn't really fit there. I think you're right.
I don't think it matters too much in my thing, because eventually I think it comes down to something as banal as snowboarding not being big enough to, like, there's not enough money in it for someone to actually supervise it. Like, it's just, like for football or all these, like, bigger sports, it's like there's a lot on the line as far as, like, money is concerned, and athletes have these $1 million paychecks, and their people are, they're interested to contain that to, like, a clean image and all these things. And the snowboarding, to some extent, people, like, stop caring because it's just not that important. And that's, unfortunately, I think that's exactly the, the point where it is unsupervised again, and all these kids, they end up being the same. If they're successful at some point, they end up being the same, like the same type of snowboarder that they would have been like 30 years earlier, I think, for the most part, you know.
I talked about it a lot yesterday. There was a demo up at one of the local mountains, and there was a bunch of brands there, and every time I'd go by the Lobster tent, I'm like, the Lobster guys to me are, that same fun-loving but really good technical freestyle team that, you know, the Rome team was before at a certain point, or, you know, the Joyride team way long ago was, or the Ride team, or so many of these teams that aren't being pushed to just compete. You know what I mean? So there's all the elements are still there. You just need to know where to look for them. And I agree with you completely that the size of snowboarding it's limited. It's limited by like where you can do it and how expensive it is.
Exactly.
They did this pilot for the Sims movie, and they just couldn't find the kind of money they needed to make it. And they one guy reached out to me and was like, you know, you're doing this podcast, you talk to these guys, who funds your thing? And I'm like, I just do it myself because I like talking to the people, you know?
Yeah.
And you could hear in his tone that he was like, oh, I need money. Like, I need big money to make this a blockbuster movie kind of thing. And you know what? I may be misrepresenting the guy and the interaction, but I remember at that moment thinking, skateboarding is just, it really is a lot than snowboarding for the reason that you can get a $35 silly, not working very well skateboard and skate up and down your driveway. And everybody has one. You know what I mean? Like in every garage, everywhere, anywhere that there's a paved road, the kids in the neighborhood have a skateboard that they share, or that everybody's got their own one in the garage. Whereas in snowboarding, you really do need to have a family that introduces you to it. You're not going to just kind of stumble into it.
That's true.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I do think skateboarding shares that basically not same, but a similar inaccessibility for different reasons. But I think it's primarily you need to know what you're like. You already need to know quite a lot to enjoy watching it.
That's true.
And I think that is because in the end, it's media what makes these sports big. You know, I'm pretty sure there's more snowboarders in the U.S. than there's football players. But I mean, like American football players. I would imagine. I'm not sure, but
I have no idea.
You know, but it in the end, it matters like what's on TV, and if someone can shoot a goal, and John Doe can understand that that's a goal, then it's really easy to market. So I think essentially skateboarding is in the same lucky spot that I think also it has a very organic limit to its growth. You know, I think it's pretty much where it can be, and it, you know, it's kind of Pat Bridges once said, skateboarding is like the cockroach of sports. You know, it can't go away. It like goes small and becomes a little bigger and goes small again. Sure. It's kind of like, so I think but there's a limit to, I think, to the size too. It's, luckily, I think.
I agree with you. I think we live in a generation where, you know, I guess I am maybe one generation ahead of you, but in our generation, surfing was just something they did in California and Hawaii and Australia, and that was it. You know, I couldn't even imagine Canadian surfing. And even when we set out to surf when we were teenagers in the late 80s, early 90s in Canada, like there just wasn't anywhere to go. You know what I mean? I mean, there have been people doing it for years and years, and the spots are starting to get busier now, but it's just, and then I feel like skateboarding and snowboarding just came up with our generation, like you said, with the movie. And I want to, with Back to the Future, I want to just say this on mic because you reminded me. I was in Burnaby at a meeting with the Parks Board because they were talking about, they had a plan to make 3 or 4 different skate parks. And I put it out there. I said, listen, you need to name one after Michael J. Fox because he's from Burnaby, and him being on a skateboard, even though he's not a skateboarder, has influenced probably more people in the world to skate. So like the Michael J. Fox skate park in Burnaby, I still think they should do it. They didn't bite on it, but they should.
That sounds awesome.
But yeah, sorry, I was just saying that we were in that bubble where kids who are born today, there's an awful lot of history there to snowboarding. Whereas you and I, like even you in 91, you get a board from Burton, you don't have far to go to become a top 10 competitor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas if you got a board today and you were 11 years old and you wanted to go compete against other 11-year-olds, a lot of them have been snowboarding since they were 5 and competing since they were 5.5.
Yeah, pretty much.
So we had this lucky break, right? And it sounds like, so how long are you on Burton and then transitioning from contests to filming, or were you always competing while you were making the movies?
Pretty much. I mean, it kind of the competing became less and less important.
Mm-hmm.
But I was on Burton from when I was 12 until when I was 16.
Yeah.
And then when I was 16, the guy at the German Burton rep, he left to go work for Salomon, and we just went with him. We were like, cool, this sounds great, you know, and it was something like, I think he said like, hey, he has, you know, he can pay us like a travel budget of like, I don't know, like $3,000 or something, or $2,000. And to us, like, I mean, you're 16 years old. Yeah. $2,000 is like, that's like $200,000 today or something. It's like I could not believe that I was about to like receive, you know, $2,000 or something. Like we were completely, so me and my friend, we just called like the Burton office in Germany and left like a voicemail that we weren't on the team anymore. Like we were like we didn't, you know, that was like our, you know, that was all the business experience that we had up until then. We're like, I think this is how you do it.
Do you still have your business cards? You mail back your business cards to Burton, like, here, get
well,
these.
I don't think they even knew of the business cards, but exactly. I don't know if they've been approved. But yeah, so from then on, I was on Salmon, and then until the end of my career, and still today, I'm still riding a Salmon board. It's kind of like extended family, like the people that work there are good friends of mine, and so I was basically on Salmon from the get-go when they started making snowboards.
Those boards were really, really good. I remember demoing them and trying them out at Blackcomb and being like, ooh, they're smooth and fast, like fast bases.
Yeah, it was a little. But it was weird, like in retrospect, like now that, like, man, snowboard's gotten so much better. I pulled like one of my old pro models from like early 2000s, pulled them out of the garage like 2 years ago. Yeah. Because I remember I really liked riding one of them. And so I thought I'll give it a go again and ride one of my old boards, and it was so shitty. Shitty in the sense that like it was just super stiff, and like I think that's also maybe like, you know, like high performance pro snowboarding. Like you know, like those boards were more made for landing than for riding. So
right.
But so yeah, today when I think snowboard's gotten so much better. So I'm not sure. I think at that point back then they were pretty good. They were pretty okay.
I think there's this thing in snowboarding where the high end stuff always has to be really stiff, right? Like, so you got stiff bindings and stiff boards.
Yeah, maybe.
Stiff boots. And I've never bid on that. I always like comfortable boots with a really supportive binding, but not like, it doesn't have to be the stiffest. And then a board, because I ride small mountains, a board that you can bend, you know what I mean? A board that you can push in the trees, but that still holds a good edge. So like I could totally see, you know, those stiff, like a super stiff 156 or something that's just, it's made for made for landing, like you said. Where do you base yourself out of? Because when I think of your snowboarding, I think of places like Utah. I always think of that gap. I don't know, like that Pyramid Gap and Chad's Gap really were at the forefront of maybe the first couple of movies that you made, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I was always like really, really based out of Europe, but then for filming, like I probably spent half of my winter in the U.S. So we had the first time I went to the U.S. was for Standard Films, and that was just crashing at the Hatchet House.
Cool. And
then I think the first year we did Robot Food, we rented a house. I mean, they rent, like Jess Gibson and Travis Parker and UC Oxen and Andrew Crawford. They rented a house together, and I had like a little attic that I would rent and crash there for the filming season, which usually wasn't more than like 3 months or something.
Right.
So that was during the winter, and then we were based out of Tahoe, and then, but we were gone I hardly was in Tahoe. Most of the time we were in Utah and Montana and, God knows where. We're kind of all over the place.
Wherever the snow was.
Kind of wherever the snow was. We drove there with, bought a car, sled, trailer, and we just kind of drove everywhere. And then the summers we spent in Portland to edit the films and to work on all the, whatever, post-production and packaging and all that stuff.
Right.
We're based in Portland. We sublet it, or we rented a part of the office that Nemo designed.
Dave Sione.
Trevor Graves. Yeah, Dave Sione was in there, and it's Trevor's agency.
Sick.
And so we were always in the summer with those guys, which was amazing.
It was a cool space, right? Really creative.
Really, really cool. And for me, it was really great because I was really into graphic design, and like I could just basically fiddle around with like some programs or like some applications, and then like if I didn't know anything, I could just walk over to one of the guys who works there and just ask them. Like it was like a the perfect internship, like without having to get everyone coffee. I could just hang out there and like ask people, and like it was pretty cool. So we did that for 3 summers, 3 years in a row, and I wonder if the Tahoe House existed until the very end. I kind of don't think so. I think Tahoe probably for 2 years, and then mainly based out of Portland. I think pretty much everyone moved to Portland for a couple of years.
Yeah, it's such a cool, eclectic city even. I love the place. Yeah. It's amazing. And most people don't know it's quite small. It's only like 200,000 people. It's not like it's not like a giant city.
Yeah, yeah.
So, okay.
So, yeah, that's where we're based. But I always my home was still in either Germany or Austria for a little while.
Right. So I remember Robot Food ripping through the industry like that's it, that's all. Like that's it, that's all was like maybe a year or two after the third film for you guys. What were the 3 films? Robot Food, Lame, and After Lame?
It was After Bang, Lame, and After Lame.
After Bang.
After Bang was the first one.
Lame and After Lame.
Lame and After Lame, yeah.
And those movies. So After Bang, that's the one.
The first one. That was the very first one.
It just was like, see, I asked Travis Rice this too because I went and saw Depth Perception, and I really liked it, and I felt like they had a similar trajectory as you guys as far as like. That's it, that's all was just so different from everything that had been done up to that point. It was so grandiose. There was something about it that was just like the cinematography was amazing. But then when you see what was the next one? Art of Flight. You're like, it's kind of the same movie. They're sort of in the same spots.
Yeah.
And then the third one, the fourth phase, it was kind of lame compared to the first 3 or first 2. And I was asking Travis, like, okay, you must be happy now with this fourth movie being so. You've gone in a different direction. It's really worked. It's crazy amazing. But I could see in his eyes how disappointed he was to hear me say that the fourth phase kind of sucked. He thought the fourth phase was awesome, and he was like, I've never heard anyone say that the fourth phase wasn't awesome. And I was like, oh,
yeah.
I don't feel like you have that. I don't feel like After Lame was not, like, I feel like those three movies pushed it and they progressively got better. But I've heard you say that you'd made the same movie kind of three times and you didn't want to do it a fourth time. And you
I think I think we made it at least. I mean, I think it usually happens that you do something good, you end up replicating it at least another time because
yes,
now you already know how to do it, right?
Yep.
And so I think at least that happens with the first two Robot Food movies, and this is also why the third one ended up being really different. But the first two are very similar. First two are just very much the same. The second one is just a more kind of polished version of the first one.
Yes.
The first one was a little more amateurish. The second one was like kind of more polished, and I think most of us were already a little bored of doing we didn't want to do the same thing again. So I think, I'm thinking in a way that's exactly what happened to Travis too, right? So he did the Art of Flight,
right?
And then he did I know he did that. That's it. That's all. And he did a perfectionized version of that with Art of Flight.
Totally.
And then he kind of started doing something more with the water movie, Fourth Phase.
Right.
So, and yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you on that. I don't think that movie worked very well. I thought it attempted something and it didn't really work so well.
Right.
And then, unfortunately, I haven't seen Depth Perception, but I have it on my list because
it's so good.
Everyone said you should check this out.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this is finally kind of like fusing this like steroid type snowboarding with actually like fun stuff, and it's kind of also not so serious.
Yep, totally. And then Truffle Pig, he did one this year, Truffle Pigs with Chris Rasmussen. It's just a short film, and it's fun and it's funny, and it is also good. So you should see that too. Cool. I think the thing with the Fourth Phase was that it was commercially successful for Travis, probably, right? Like so. To me, I'm a snowboarder. I went to see a snowboard film, and I felt like I didn't really see a snowboard film. Whereas the general public that watches Red Bull TV was probably fine with it or liked it. So Travis probably got that feedback. Or I don't know, man. Maybe it's really hard to critique your own movies, especially when you're one of the biggest snowboard stars in the world. You know what I mean?
Which isn't, but on the other, I'm actually surprised because I think I always thought Travis was like very, very self-critiquing. I think that's also, I think most people who are that successful at what they do, as he is, you can only get to that point if you constantly like bash yourself for what you've done before, or at least like to some extent, right? So, and also I think the depressing thing about filmmaking of any kind, any type of film, I think at least, is that, or any type of creation for the most part, is that you make something, but you set out to make something much more grandiose than what you end up with. Like hardly ever will you hit the target. You will shoot for the stars, and then you end up making something that's not a complete piece of shit. And so, and that is okay, and I think it's like, I think that's just how it goes. And I listened to this one interview. I don't even know who it was, but I think it was a designer or something. He said, he had a really funny way of wording it. He said, you set out for a masterpiece, but you end up with a very different kind of piece. And he meant piece of shit. And he said the only way to bridge that creative gap, he said, was to just simply keep doing it. And then you end up, making that gap smaller and smaller and smaller, because you know what you can do, you have a little more realistic planning, and you also, I think you just get better at craft, which essentially is the very, very boring truth to mostly all good creation, is just craft and just someone like biting through it,
Totally. I think a lot of the masters have honed their craft maybe in a traditional way, and when they truly do the thing they're going to be remembered for, they break out and put themselves into it. You know what I mean? I was talking with my kid yesterday, and he referenced Picasso. Like that looks like a Picasso, right? It's disjointed and it doesn't make any sense and it's kind of childish. And I said, did you know Picasso was classically trained and could paint like photorealistic paintings? Like he's a brilliant painter. And
Absolutely.
When he chose to do those paintings, like that's what resonated with people. And I think what you were saying before as well, making a piece of crap as opposed to a masterpiece. I think most people who make creative work don't like what they're doing for the first really long amount of time. So that's why when you go up to someone and say, oh, I saw your shot in this magazine or whatever, or your video part. Oh, that's so great. I'm your biggest fan. It makes them uncomfortable a little bit because they know they didn't really, that 5 that they put down in the video part, they were trying for a 10 the whole
exactly.
time.
Yeah, pretty much. That's kind of like, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So I
do think then people who keep at it, that I don't really know what it is either. Now that's a question, that's a theoretical question. Do they reach where they want to go, or do they simply adjust their expectations of where they can go? You don't know that, right?
Right.
But if I look at like the really great filmmakers, if you look like Alfonso Cuarón or any of those guys who are just like really up there, and I'm thinking like the level of craft that they have is so incredible that you can just they had to work there constantly to get there, and I'm sure they worked through a lot of really shitty stuff to there, and I think it ends up I think it's a frustrating way to get to a point where it maybe becomes a little easier again.
Right. Yeah, I've definitely personally found that this year of the podcast, like a conversation like this one that just kind of goes all over the place and is quite open, is much more comfortable than the pigeonholed conversations I had in the first couple of seasons where I would say, what was your first board? Did you ever meet Craig Kelly? And that would lead to good conversations, but and I would love them, but then I'd put them out into the world and I knew in my heart that they weren't what I wanted to do exactly. And I knew that the recording wasn't perfect, and I knew that I was cutting myself out of them a lot of the time because I couldn't stand hearing myself talk, and that made it even worse. And I knew that, but I kept doing it anyways, So for the first year, I think I quit after every single episode. But I'd heard a quote from Ira Glass, who talks a lot about this. And he said, the reason you got into it is because your taste is good. And because your taste is good, then the things you're making kind of suck.
Yeah, that's really a very terrible reality. Especially if you're already if you're interested in a particular subject, or a particular discipline of art or of whatever, if you're interested, then usually, at some point you can tell the good from the bad. Mm-hmm. And that's a problem when you look at your own work, I think that understanding develops much faster than your craft. And so, your understanding of what's good and what's bad, I think it can progress fairly quick, while the craft is a slow and painful process.
Sometimes,
so I think
Do you have some friends like this, like whether it's in snowboarding or in filmmaking or anything, where they're not that good, but they don't really care? They're having so much fun. I envy those people so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, and also I think, I don't really know. It's almost like I envy whoever, I guess the earlier you start doing something without thinking too much about it, like when I started snowboarding, I mean, of course, like maybe a year or two into it, I had all these idols and I wanted to be sponsored. There was goals, but it was mainly, like I didn't know if it was shitty or not. I was just riding. Right. And I think if you I think that's a very, very nice place to be, to just do it without maybe even having the proper means of evaluating whether that's good or bad.
Right.
And that's something I think that's more likely to happen if you're able to like follow your heart and do whatever you're interested in, because then, it's simply an interest versus, it's not like, it doesn't really have to, hold up to the high standards of self-fulfillment and all these things that, I don't know if I look at like, the films I've made and all these things, I always it was always the thought also of like, is it going to be good enough? Like that. And that's like, it's just like joy killing to a maximum. Right. And then I have other friends who are filmmakers who just like, man, this is amazing to make. Like, I don't care if this is good or bad. And that's like, so that's the mindset you want to be in. But I think it's, it takes a special type of attitude to be in that mindset. And I think some people are more prone to be in that than others.
I think you're right. I think you're totally right.
I think that's then we're at the probably the essential challenge of life is like somehow opening up a space where you allow yourself to follow those things that are intrinsically yours, and that don't really serve a higher purpose other than the sheer interest, like what you're doing right now, right? Like you're doing a podcast, but you're doing it because you're interested in it. And then it ends up being something that's worth something because it's, and you don't even notice how you progress probably and you notice, but it's not like I hope it's not a painful process, right? No, it's like, because it's interesting while you're doing it. I think that's, but I think it takes, it basically takes, like there's so much distraction to take you away from what is yours towards, seeing other things and what other people do and asking yourself whether that might be yours. And I think,
sure.
So it's really, I think that's the biggest challenge is kind of,
did that kind of happen to you with snowboarding? Because I feel like snowboarding was yours. Like when
totally,
I see
like
you
100%,
snowboarding, I'm like, that guy, snowboarding he is as good as a person could get at snowboarding. And you were that. And did something else kind of catch your attention to take you away, or did you burn out on it? Or because you walked away when you could have stayed, it feels like to me.
Yeah. So first part of the question is, it was totally mine. Like, yes. And that's exactly because, and that's also like, I think, why I have while that was so clear to me in retrospect, like looking at how I tried to do other things is with snowboarding, it was like playful, like up until the point where I was already kind of okay until I started, trying to like, or maybe to fulfill expectations. Like at that point when that hit, I was already good enough to fulfill them normally.
Right.
And so, but the first, 5, 6, 7 years of snowboarding, it was just what I wanted to do. And there was no ulterior motive other than snowboarding.
Right.
And also, of course, in that age, to a fanatic extent that I think is very hard to maintain beyond your teenage years, of course. So in that sense, I think it's natural that you somewhat, that I don't want to say life becomes more dull, but in a way, I think that's what growing up is I think it's, you don't have that much of like a unilateral focus anymore, right? Like, I think it's a little more all over the place when you grow up.
Sure.
And so, but I think with snowboarding, it was totally mine, right? Like it was just something I enjoyed doing. And I think that coincided, luckily, that I was talented. And then someone, patted me on the back or gave me a free snowboard, and that fueled it. And that's basically all you need for success, right? And then you just, that doesn't mean that I had like large obstacles to overcome all the time. Like I remember one of really like a pivotal moment for me, for instance, was I was like 19. I had already, I was like I think I was just on the verge of being on Salmon's international team. And like, I had already been like second at the junior worlds. Like I was like kind of like in the starting blocks of a pro career. And I watched all the videos, like everything. I'd seen everything like 100 times. And my team manager back then, Ben Pruce, he sent me on this trip to Chile with Joey McGuire, Shin Campos, and Ilan Bushell. And yeah, that's really rad. But to me, when I heard who I was going with, like I was really excited to go on that trip. But I thought, because those were kind of like, I don't want to say the B grade pros, but those were that wasn't Peter Line. So my idea was, I'm really excited to go there, but my thought was, I'm going to be much better than them. And then I rolled up, and they whooped my ass to the point where I was like, it was ridiculous how much better they were. It was such a harsh reality check. Like really, like, you wouldn't believe. Like I had, and then it made me realize, like, holy shit. For a second, I had let myself slip into like, a little early success, and like thinking that I was like on the road to like, kind of like, good, good, one of those good pros. And then I met these guys who I love, by the way. And like, fuck, it ended up being one of the best trips of my life. Rad. Like it was fucking, those guys are awesome. And I love them.
Of course.
I was just saying, like, my mindset before going was like that of this little, kind of like arrogant little brat who had won some contest. And I was like, dude, I've seen Joey McGuire do like some 540s in MacDuck movie. I can do like 720s, no problem. Like, and I go there, and those guys are like just twice as good of snowboarders as I was. Like, it was ridiculous. So going back to what I said, it was like I always had these kind of steps where I had to realize, like, hold on a second, like you're way down the food chain. Like there's no, like you're not there yet. And so I was progressively kind of like still, but that fuels you to like become better and become better.
Of course,
You have to surround yourself with people who are better than you, that all the time. And so, but still, that was like, I think I got to this frustrating level, or this little frustrating bump, but I had already kind of like organically, I had the craft to better myself. It wasn't like impossible to become better. I was already a decent snowboarder, decent enough, And so I think that's what essentially needs to happen. Like that, when you hit those really frustrating bumps, that you have something like that you're already somewhat okay at what you do, to like, I don't know, turn it into something and
inspire yourself, right? Like, and
yeah, totally.
I think that can happen. I know for a fact it happened with me, as a young employee at a shop. I always looked at the owner thinking, owning a shop's just so easy. It's so much easier than what I do. I'm there, 60 hours a week, and I'm doing all the cash outs, and I'm managing the staff and doing all this stuff. What does the boss even do? And I think that's a theme that most guys and girls in their 20s and leading into their 30s, you have to learn that just because you're looking at people like you looking at someone on a screen and you go, okay, well, I could do better than that for sure. You don't realize, okay, that's a real person who's worked really hard to get there. And in real life, they're still improving and working on their game. And they're doing probably the same thing, right? Like Sheen's going riding with Terrier and going, holy shit, I need to step up my game. But more importantly, once you start focusing on what you're doing and say, okay, listen, if I want to own a shop, then there's a few other steps I need to take. And then usually it's a big surprise when you get there too. You go, oh God, I don't want to own a shop. I'd rather work for the guy who owns a shop. Or I don't want to be the top pro. That's a hell of a lot of work. And just never home and always traveling and putting your body on the line and trusting in people to build jumps that have proper landings, or, you know what I mean? Like, or building it yourself, and that's a lot of work. And then, the weather doesn't come in, or the filmer doesn't get the shot. And you're going, oh my God, that was perfect, but you missed the shot. Are you serious? So that's a really good lesson to have learned, fairly early on. What drove you to be as, God, you were just so good at going upside down, and you pushed the sport quite a bit. And as far as big airs in the backcountry go, where did that energy come from? The people you were riding with, from yourself, or?
I think that was probably. I mean, the type of snowboarding I did, I think, had a lot to do with just simply what suited my talent, I guess. I had I really early on, as a kid, I was one of those kids that, who could really easily do backflips and stuff. I was just very acrobatic, and so I think it naturally drew me to this type of acrobatic snowboarding. Not that I necessarily think that that's the coolest type of snowboarding. I just kind of went the way of the least resistance, and that's what's that was my strength, I guess. And what I also, there's things where I knew I wanted to try and wanted to explore, and so I think that was there's very natural, I think, and eventually, to your question whether I, had burned out or not, I think it's just that at some point, snowboarding is very cyclical. You do the same thing every year, and once you've kind of, we had done 6 movies in a row, or I had done 6 movies in a row or something, and I would consider myself a fairly curious person with, and I thought, man, I've seen everything here. There's so much more out there, and outside of snowboarding, outside of whatever. And so that was mainly my thought of I was too curious I wanted to see other stuff,
you knew what you were in for. If you went for another year of filming, you knew what you were in for.
I think that's and also to some extent, I guess. Once the curiosity and the drive you have to be, if you're entirely honest, you definitely have some kind of pathological drive to impress other people or yourself if you jump 100 feet and do a double flip of some sort. There's something wrong with you, right? So which is great. I'm all for narcissistic drive to there's a lot of productivity that comes out of that too. Hell right. Yeah. But I think once you fulfill that, or I fulfilled that to some extent, I think my appetite for risk also decreased quite a lot. Like if you feel like, I don't even know who I want to impress anymore.
Right.
Like, not that I impressed everyone. It's just, I think it's also
you did.
You have these crazy idols like J.P. Walker, Peter Line, and then those guys vote you to be Rider of the Year. It's like completely mind-boggling.
Yeah, of course.
And then that happens twice, and then that suddenly you adjust to that being a fact. And I mean, that does something. Like, I'm not saying like quite the contrary. I don't think my feet left the ground. I think rather I was like, so now what? Like, that's like my entire snowboard career was built on like being close to those kind of people that I was idolizing. And then I think once you get there, you're like, well, nothing really changes. Now I'm here, and like it's still all the same, right? So what's next? And I think this is like, that's in a way, it's like this, like this. What is this? Like, it's like, why climb a mountain? Because it's there, right? It's like that's why we do things. It's like, and you get up on the peak of the mountain, and then so what? Like, you walk back down and then do what? And so I think to some extent, like my personal mountain, I climbed that to some extent. Right. And then I realized like, hey, I've climbed that and I already know what it's like to having climbed that particular mountain. Then so maybe I don't really understand why I should risk myself jumping this like 100-foot ice jump and possibly being paralyzed. Right. So I'm suddenly realizing like I'm decreasing that. And so that kind of goes hand in hand with like kind of phasing out. And
is there anything in there of the next generation coming up? Like, do you see the kids that are hot on your heels and go like, oh, okay, like all things are going to come to an end. Here come the kids that are doing what I'm doing, except they're younger and they're hungrier and they're going to go bigger, or they're willing to hit that icy jump and they're not even thinking about it. I'm thinking about it. Maybe I'm going to book out, or that didn't really happen. It sounds like you're saying
I think it was like my curiosity hit early enough to where when I decided to depart, I was still technically kind of at somewhat of, I think, what was happening. Like I was, like if I was at a contest, like there was still no one doing like tricks that I was like, oh fuck, I can't do that. Like,
so that didn't happen.
That didn't happen. So that didn't happen. It did feel like a fairly, like a conscious choice to be like, I'm out. And it wasn't like, oh my God, I can't keep up.
Cool.
I think like right now, like that right now it feels like that. Like I watch what they do and I'm like, holy fucking shit.
But it's
like,
been 10 years. So,
and it's completely like I still like mentalize a lot of the tricks those guys do. Like I look at them, I'm like, do I know what that would feel like? And for the most part I do. I think for like a quadruple I'm out, but like I can still imagine in my mind like what some of those tricks might feel like.
Of course.
But I watch it, I'm like, oh my God, like the stakes are so high. I'm so glad I have nothing to do with this. Like it scares the shit out of me.
Amazing.
And so, but I think that came afterwards.
Did you see Terrier's poach run at the U.S. Open? Did you catch that?
Right now? Like just this?
Like yesterday?
No, I didn't.
It was epic. It was epic. Just
he's still so good.
Oh, he is so good. It's so like, and I could see you doing that too. I could see you dropping into a super pipe and having an epic run, and it would be amazing to watch. But it's crazy what they're doing now for sure. And I've never really been a contest watching person. I'd rather be out snowboarding, and I'm not saying that like for any reason other than I've never watched sports. So like watching the highlights and who's going to win and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I like watching my friends, you know what I mean? At a lower level or if there's some local pro or some pro at our local mountain riding, it's so fun to watch people that are really, really good in real life. But sitting on a couch watching snowboarding, to me, unless it's a video, I could definitely do that. But I kind of got away from it. I feel like I watched the robot food stuff, and then I got into the Art of Flight stuff and the Brain Farm stuff. Were people from Brain Farm working with the robot food guys? Was there some
no, not
crossover
really.
there?
No, there's not. I mean, we knew each other fairly well, I'd say. But I don't think there was an overlap on like filmers and stuff.
Right. Okay. Okay. And then there were some Rome movies in there and Videograss. I remember watching Videograss stuff.
Yeah.
And so there were fun movies in between and always, but I definitely, as I got older, I stopped being so hungry to see what's happening this year. You know what I mean? It's kind of, once it's beyond what I could imagine doing, it's kind of like, another movie of stuff I can't do.
Yeah, I still keep up with I'd say the most. I don't even want to say the biggest or something, or the most relevant, but whatever kind of comes through my feed of you know, following Mark McMorris on Instagram or stuff like that. That's
like the Kazoo movie this year or something. Did you see that?
Yeah, but that, for instance, I only saw the trailer. I didn't see the movie.
It's a really good movie.
And then and then Jérôme Tanon sent me the Zabardast movie that he made.
Rad.
I haven't watched yet, and I have I see a bunch of stuff, and then but it's pretty random. I saw one thing I really highly recommend for everyone. Well, I thought, anyways, is Mathieu Crepel's movie. Do you see that?
Which one was it?
It's called Shaka.
Yeah, I can't say that I have.
It's pretty crazy. It's because it's a proper movie. It's a proper movie. It has a proper premise. Because he is trying to become a big wave surfer, and that's the movie. And it's completely insane. And it's a really cool movie. So that's one thing I saw recently, which I really liked.
Gotta check that out. So let's talk about what you're doing now. You transitioned from, you obviously were helping edit the films and cover art design and stuff. And did you do any filming at all? Handling the
little bit. Yeah. I did some later on though on Robot Food. I only edited a bonus feature, and I did all the packaging design, all that stuff.
Cool.
But then after Robot Food, I basically did my own movies with my brother and Christoph Weber and we all edited and kind of conceived the idea on how to do that, to do those movies. And but I think I filmed it a little bit. I filmed if there's one specific part in Japan which was Super 8, then I shot the Super 8 or something. Or
Rad.
But we usually had sometimes I would draw storyboards for an intro or something, but I wasn't the guy on the camera, more the directing part. That was my thing.
So where have you landed? What passionate avenue have you followed for the last?
Yeah, that's
years?
A good question. I'm still trying to answer that. I think I would still say it's still all over the place.
Yep.
So after snowboarding, I went to film school actually. So
cool.
I went to really proper, directing film school.
Nice.
I had worked before, or in the the late stages, from basically middle of my snowboarding career till the end. I had worked as a graphic designer, part time.
Mm-hmm.
And we also, actually I did do some camera work also, because we ended up shooting some advertising stuff, and we started kind of getting more into film production, beyond the snowboard movies. And then I thought if we keep on doing that, I think that's going to be a job. And so I decided that I never went to college or a university. So I applied to film school, and I guess more of a thought, like the thought behind it was more like, let's give it a try and see if I like it, and then see what comes of it. And I did that, but like maybe the second year into it, I already started working again on design stuff on the side. So I've been kind of bouncing back and forth since then. So, and then for the last, I'd say almost 10 years, I've been bouncing between like design and brand work. I would say that's like my job.
Yeah.
But that is it's a very broad range from, still doing like some conceptual work on like, some films or advertising and brands, but then also doing like actual hands-on stuff like designing a website or designing a packaging or something. So it's kind of like a broad mix of, I'd say, visual stuff that sometimes has more of a narrative and sometimes less. But I'd say it's a fairly wide area, I'd say.
Is it something similar to what you saw? Was it Trevor Graves and Dave Cioni at Nemo?
Well, they had I'm not sure if Dave was just subletting from them or if he actually co-founded. I'm not sure.
I don't know what his deal was there, but he was doing quirky design stuff. I remember seeing the things he was doing and being like, I'm into that. Like, he's such a creative mind. That's so dope.
Yeah, so Dave is really, I think Dave is like similarly all over the place, since he's a real craftsman. Like, he's like actually building stuff, and then he was like really getting, I think, into like metal welding and stuff when the last time I was at Nemo, and he was making films, and then Trevor's, I mean, he's originally a photographer, of course, and then his agency does everything from design to brand, and so I think, I mean, they're I don't know how big they are now, but when I was there last, there were like 50 people. That's a big shop.
Damn. So did that kind of inspire like what you're doing a little bit? Like, are you kind of?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. I mean, I was always thinking like when we founded the production company to make the films after Road Food, so that was called Blank Paper, and we did 91 Words and In Short and those films. Yeah. That would always like eventually kind of transition into an agency type thing, and that it kind of for a variety of reasons it was kept as a film production company. It still exists. My brother still produces like advertising through that company, so that still exists.
I remember the 91 Words for Snow movie. I think, now you can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, I remember it didn't have like a start menu like a normal movie, because like we would just pop the movie in at the shop, and usually you just hit play and then it would start. That movie, it had like, there were different avenues you could go down. It was like, it was, and sometimes it would be this long epic movie that was like, okay, the movie was there. How did we get there? And other times you would press play and it would do it like a short 5-minute thing. Or am I wrong in remembering that?
There wasn't 91 Words. It was on. I know that on In Short, we had a DVD menu that if you had it, if you didn't do anything for like a couple minutes, it would randomly start like these random little bits of movies. It was
rad.
Like, really random, like 20 different ones. Like
20 that's it. That's the one. That's the movie I'm thinking of. I remember being like, I'm perplexed by this movie. You have to like just leave it alone.
That was fun.
And then it starts doing its thing.
Yeah, we did. We always tried to like, also with Robot Food, we always tried to do little Easter eggs.
Easter eggs everywhere.
If you hit, enter at the right time, you would get somewhere. It was fun. Kind of like...
Some of our listeners will have Robot Food right now. And where should they queue it up and get... What's a good Easter egg? Do you remember one?
I remember on Afterlame, there's one in Travis Parker's... I mean, there's not really parts, but I think when Travis is wearing... Or is it Lame? It might be Lame. It's either Lame or Afterlame. Travis is wearing like a... a sweater with an American eagle on it.
Yeah.
If you hit enter, it'll get you somewhere.
Nice.
I think.
Sick.
So that's one thing I remember, and I remember that the code for Afterbang on the DVD, there's an actual code you can punch in for extra movies, and the code is 283, and it queues up all the extra movies in a row. But
awesome.
That's the only thing I remember.
Hey, that's two really good things. So some of the listeners right now are writing it down, getting their DVDs out. I remember that era being really fun with the Easter eggs, especially for the movie makers, right? Like, because for us, like,
I think we were just like, DVD was a new type of medium, so I think we were just trying to see if there's like kind of somewhat, I don't know, interesting stuff that you could do with it, where you can hide things or do stuff with the menus that's different.
Totally. So how many days a year are you out there getting, riding your board? You still getting 20 days a year kind of thing? Or
yeah. I'd say I was, maybe it's like 30, maybe.
Sweet. Yeah, that's a respectable season.
I think 30 would be, and it kind of depends. Like, but I usually try to go on like one like proper snowboarding trip, which is normally like already like 10 days snowboarding, and then like another 20 days like throughout the weekends and stuff.
Yeah, rad.
But yeah, I had some really, really good days already this year, and then it kind of died down a bit, but we had a really good early season here.
Yeah, we had a kind of weird early season, and then we had a great February. It was just epic. Lots of snow. They're having a crazy year down in Tahoe too. Jackson's been
I heard about it.
Japan's been going off. Yeah, it's going to be good for the movies. I remember talking with Devin about it, that it's difficult to film a good part in a bad snow year, right? Like, so when you really, really want to film a good part, when you're feeling that pressure, if you get a bad snow year, it's a bummer. You have a bad, then you're bummed out.
Totally.
So, well, that's rad, dude.
Especially those Whistler guys, because they just don't really. They just stay there. They just stay there and they just film there. I mean, I don't blame him. It's the best terrain in the world, right? So
Chris Rasman asked me that. He said, "Well, what do you think, man? Because a lot of people in Whistler feel pressured to leave, but like, why would you leave when it's good here?" And I was like, I don't know, man. Yeah, stay where you're having fun. They're going out to all new zones and the stuff that those guys are doing too, just snowboarding on every front, right? Like, I think my favorite place where it's getting pushed is side hits, like Arthur Longo's side hits. Have you ever seen that? It's just
it's amazing.
It's stuff that is obtainable to like the resort rider guy, kind of. Like it's like you going to Chile with Shin and Joey and thinking, I'm gonna rookie these guys. But if Arthur Longo comes to like Seymour, all of a sudden he sees something that we overlooked for 25 years. Like, where did he come up with that? That's sick.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I love that stuff. Yeah, I love it for sure. All right, man. I'm getting tired. I really appreciate this conversation, David. It was cool. a real honor to talk to you, man.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. Stoked. Good reminiscing,
Yeah, man. You're one of the best people for me to listen to talk about snowboarding. You really stirred up in me that nostalgic feeling of how important it was to me as a kid. You know what I mean? Like, if you saw somebody that was wearing a thing, like those two-tongue boots, and there's tons of stuff like that for me.
Yeah.
Where
totally.
you would see somebody with the thing that you saw in the magazine that you really wanted, and then you could see it in real life, or you'd go in the shop on the day that it showed up and you'd be, unwrapping it or taking it out of a box and looking at the newest thing and just being in awe of stuff. I miss that. And you know what? I don't miss it too much because I still get it sometimes. You know?
Yeah, the cool thing is I think there's no reason why that shouldn't be the same for the kids right now, right? Like, if they get the new whatever boot, or if they, I don't know, it's like, I think it's still the same. It's just that I think that was our time of, you know, being able to have such an intimate relationship with like a product, right?
Totally. Absolutely, dude. All right, man. Well, thanks again. Cool. And
you're welcome.
I'm sure I'll be calling you again in the future. I'll come up with some other reason to chat with you again, dude.
Cool, man.
All right.
Good talking to you.
All right, man.
Have a good night.
Yeah,
bye-bye.
Thanks. Have a great day. FNRad shoutouts this week to Transworld Snowboarding, who've actually sadly announced that they are closing their doors after more than 30 years of magazines. Transworld is such a big part of my experience in snowboarding, like reading those magazines cover to cover. You know, I don't know what to say. It's a bummer. It's definitely the end of an era. They've done so much for snowboarding over the years, so thank you very much, Transworld. And thank you to all my listeners. I met so many of you over the last few weeks. It's too many to mention here on the show, but I love getting your messages of support, and be sure to come back next week for another episode of the FNRad Snowboarding Podcast, brought to you by SIA Productions.